Hi everybody, it's Mark Shellshear. This is the Mark Art Show coming to you from the Shellshear project in Brisbane, Australia. In the last 24 hours, I've been asked a lot about what's the project about and how does it go about. Now, it's very difficult to explain it here because it's very much tailored to one-on-one. But I'm going to talk about something today which is about strategies, and this is what we talk often about. It's about strategies for artists. Okay, so let's think about this. There's so many artists that I know of today who exhibit in group shows and art fairs and shows nearly on a monthly basis, out there all the time showing their work. Now, that's good, that's positive. And then I ask them, how many sales do you get out of this? Does it translate to sales being in these shows constantly? And the majority of them say to me, no, not really. But then, and they always clarify by saying, well, then nobody else sold at that art fair either. So, okay, so now let's think about this. And then I always ask, well, what do you get out of it? And they say they always get exposure. And I say, well, exposure is all well and good, but the bank doesn't accept exposure. You can't pay your rent with exposure, and you certainly can't wear exposure. So exposure in many respects is an excuse. It's a way of justifying the loss of not getting somewhere with the show. Now, artists have got to show. I get that. You've got to show constantly, and you've got to show as much of your work as possible. And people join these groups and do all this because it's cheaper, it doesn't cost as much, but unfortunately it doesn't translate to many sales. So this is what we would do within the project. We would sit down and we would say, first of all, what I would like you to do is work out how much it costs you on an average to be in one of these group shows. Now, I don't just mean the cost of the fees to be in the show. I mean for traveling, for food, for paying for the reception, the artist reception would be there. All this has got to be taken into thought and thought about, and then put it down on a bit of paper. And then on the other side of the piece of paper, write down all the sales that you've had from all the shows you've been in over the past 12 months, say. Now, if the column on the left with expenses is much bigger than the column on the right, which was sales, then we have a problem. And what we've got to do is sit down and look at strategies of what you were doing. Okay, now, for example, if you did sell some work in one or two shows, the answer would be to sit down and look at these two shows and analyze what happened. Sit down and take a pencil and paper and sit down and write out the things that happened in that show that were different from all the other ones where you didn't sell. And there will be things differently. You will have done some things differently, and you may not have even remembered doing them. And this is one of the problems. People have success, they don't write it down, so then it's very difficult to repeat it. If it's not written down, it's like it never happened. So you've got to write it out step by step, what you did differently, so then you can implement that into the next show. Now, if it's costing you so much to be in all these shows, and you can limit it down to 3 or 4 shows or 5 a year or something like that, and then you know how much money, because you realized how much you spent in it, you now have an idea of how much money you can afford to put into these 4 or 5 shows in a year and what you'd expect to receive back in sales. And that's what you're looking for. So once you've analyzed the successful shows and you know the steps you did, then you can repeat those steps, and hopefully that will bring the similar success. We do things like, sometimes we get very excited about a show and then we really put a lot of effort into it. You see, the sales and all this takes place before you get to the exhibition. It's all the preparation you've done beforehand. Did you send out emails? Who did you send those emails to? Did those people arrive? Did they come? Did you text message your friends and invite them to be there? Did you get out there? You see, we do it once or twice, but then after a while, when we're doing this every month, the people, we think, oh, well, I can't annoy them. I invited them to the last 5 shows and they didn't come. And you see, this is when it becomes not worth it, because it's not translating into sales. It's not translating into anything but expenses. And we've got to limit those expenses, and we've got to limit them to the shows that work. So once you know how it works properly and what you did that made it work so well, you can then repeat it. Maybe you did email all your collectors and invite them personally to come. I think that's a wonderful thing. You should do that to every single show you have. You can text message them if you have their phone numbers and invite them along personally. You can even ring people. I mean, I was talking to somebody in sales the other day, and they were talking about how they've been using social media a lot for their selling. And they said in the end, it comes down to picking up the telephone and making the phone call. That works better than anything else. He said, person to person, when I ring them up and chase it up, he said it works best. And that's good advice. So there you go, guys. That will work for you too. It does sound a little bit like cold calling, and you may feel that you were doing that, but that personal invitation is very important, especially in this day and age where mail doesn't seem to work that well. But if you can use mail, I would still use that. You see, once you know how much expenses you have and you are able to use that money now in a strategic way, you may be able to use old-fashioned mail where you can do a handwritten invitation. Even if you're going to do it through a carrier or through some, a special mailing service, do so. These things are important. People love the personal touch. The social media is great because it brought us all closer together, but it's also pushed us all further apart because people don't actually look at emails much anymore. People scan emails. Unless you're really looking for that email, you're wanting it to come, you kind of scan it. You don't really read it. So emails are not doing what they used to do. We get so many PMs in our messenger on Facebook that kind of you rush through those too. A little bit of difference, a little bit of special care would make all the difference. And you now have an expense, you know what your expenses can be, so you can allocate money towards that and make strategic moves and choices to sell your work. Far better than the hit and miss of being in every show you possibly can be in and getting exposure, and that's wonderful, but that's not the answer. The answer is getting sales, and it's all done in the preparation before you get there. Now, email people, PM people, text message people, ring people, and if you've got the extra finances, send them mail. Send them something that they hold in their hands that you took the time to do and send to them. I remember one guy, he had a show and he actually hand drew pictures and invited people to come along and mailed it to them. It was dramatic, had a fabulous effect. They got a free little painting and they came to the show and he had a good sales. It's important you do that. Think about advertising on Facebook. When you get you got your invitation and you put it up on Facebook and it's got everybody's name on it. Boost that, send it out. You can actually send it deliberately to people who may buy your work. It's being strategic. It's analyzing your past sales and your past not very successful shows and finding out what you did and how you did it to make the successful shows and what you didn't do in the unsuccessful shows, and you can analyze all that, you can reflect on it and come up with answers, and you can repeat success if you know what it was. Very important to know what you've done, guys, and you've got to write it out. Remember what I said, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Okay, so I hope that helps. That gives you a little bit of insight in what we do in the Shellshear project when we go look at your life, look at your work, look at your art, and make strategic choices on how we can change it so you can get sales. Because sales is what it's all about. Okay, there's no good being needy, it's being deserving. If you deserve the sales through preparation, through getting ready, through knowing what you're doing, through putting it all down and then acting it out, having a plan, then it works better. It does every time. Okay, you have a great day, guys. I hope that helps a little bit, encourages you. Remember that people are hurting out there. Hugs and smiles are free. Give them away generously and you'll receive back as well. You have a fabulous day. I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. Ciao.